Hello, good morning for some, afternoon for others. We will get this webinar started in about 2 minutes. We're going to let a couple of other folks join in. Let's plan on getting started right at about 10:02. All right, looks like we have a few people trickling in still. We are going to give it one more minute and we'll get started at 10:02. All right, welcome. Good morning and good afternoon. Let's get started with the strategies DSOs are using to scale. Before we jump into introductions for myself and my co-host here, we're going to go through a few different housekeeping items. The first is we want this to be an interactive session. There are going to be polls that happen sporadically throughout the presentation. So please interact, engage with those polls so we can get your feedback. Additionally, there is a chat window. It looks like some of you have already started engaging with the chat. So please don't be afraid to drop your questions in there. We'll periodically check and make sure that those questions get answered. Finally, at the end of this session, if you're looking for more insights, there will be a QR code scan for an awesome download. And you'll also get the contact information for myself and for my co-host here. Speaking of which, let's dive into who's leading this session today. First, I'll introduce Ryan Torreson, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Peak Dental Services. Peak Dental Services is a DSO that serves multiple locations across Colorado and Texas. Ryan, thanks for joining us today.
Morning, afternoon. Thanks for having me, Josh.
Yeah. And then quick on myself. So there's a couple things here. One, it says Chief Revenue Officer at In Revenue Capital. Both of those are half right. So I'm actually a partner at In Revenue Capital, an early stage investment firm that invests in B2B vertical SaaS companies like Peerlogic, which I am currently the Chief Revenue Officer of. So half truths on both. Either one, they're both accurate enough. Let's get rolling. So we're going to kick this thing off with a little bit of interaction, and we're going to start with a poll. So for those of you that are listening in, which of these are you focused on for the remainder of 2025? First, scaling more locations, standardizing systems, integrating a specialty into your practice or practices, getting more patients in the door. I'm guessing that will be fairly popular. And other, there's something in the comments that you would like to share. All right, so let's get those poll questions moving in. Our folks who are working in the background here, I don't know when we see the results, if we see them now or if we see them after, but we'll go ahead and keep this train moving as we think about things here. All right, so can we see this on the screen now? All right, there we go. Emerging DSOs, those in the growth stage. So I've often heard as I'm getting myself into this ecosystem a little bit more that there's kind of like the jump to 3, then the jump to 9, and then this jump to like 20 and 30. So Ryan, tell us when you get into this emerging stage of a DSO and you start to see the inklings of scale, what are some of those first things that you see DSOs butt their head up against?
Yeah, so initially, right? So scaling is really scaling without a foundation is like adding floors to a building without reinforcing the beams on it. Eventually, something's going to crack. So when you look at that, and initially you're kind of building it up and figuring out, hey, like what should we be doing? It's going to be unified systems, standardizing the KPIs, and cross-department visibility. So you want to avoid the blind spots. And so if you build a nice, good, strong foundation as you're building out the DSO, it makes scaling a whole heck of a lot easier for them to move forward, whether that be operationally through a system like Denicon, or it's what are the right marketing softwares we should put in, down to what are the right SOPs on how we should execute these things and move it forward.
One of the blind spots that I've seen a lot of DSO leadership talk to me about is they just don't know from front office to front office what good looks like. How do you track it? How do you monitor it? How do you know that the front office leader from one office is doing the same thing as the other one? Do you see that being a problem as places scale?
Absolutely, can be a pretty big big problem for a lot of them. And so this goes back to kind of my comment earlier, right? Like put the right system in place and track it. And so one of the things that's good out there, whether it be through people like myself or you or dental shows, et cetera, you can actually benchmark pretty well what some of the KPIs should be for your practice and what should be going on. And then if you build in the right SOPs and you build in the right systems, I generally will know what the front desk person is doing throughout their day. And with good teamwork and morning huddles set up, you'll be able to help that person be in a position to be successful, which will also elevate up to the management of the office or the group. Hey, here's some things where maybe we're not doing it so hot, or maybe we're doing it really great, but where can we arm up the help and spread the good news throughout the organization so that the rest of the DSO can benefit from it?
Yeah, it's a great call out because I think there's so much, at least initially, the thought on, listen, I'm a dentist, right? And I'm looking to scale up on the clinical side. So operatories and different procedures and things like that that you can offer to the patient. But at the end of the day, the lifeblood of the practice is still the phone system in a lot of cases, right? 80% of revenue is likely still flowing through that phone. So making sure that there is that consistency across how you deliver that first patient engagement when someone picks up the phone and calls and talks to your front office staff. It's super important to be able to track and measure those outcomes.
Correct. So it's a huge one. So most of the DSOs, and we went through this ourselves with most DSOs I even talked to, they'll be shocked once you look at their missed call rates. It's usually pretty high. So all of a sudden they're in the 20, 30%. And what I tell everybody is, that's basically one out of every four phone calls that likely is not going to come back to your practice. Because really the way it works is, right, you call in someplace today, whether you're existing patient or new, you don't answer the phone. There's a good chance they just go down Google or somewhere else and they just call that next dental office on the list. So 100% right. You want to get the visibility in on the missed call things or missed call rates there. Good scripting up front. If somebody's too staffed up front or we got a skeleton crew up front, what systems can we put in place to aid them and guide them? And then it's like what you said is, let's deliver on what the patient is expecting. So let's make sure that scripting's right. And for a lot of dental offices, it's going to come down to at your convenience on your budget with dental professionals you can trust. So let's get you in for an appointment as soon as possible.
Yeah, one of those things I always said, I have a background in consulting, and I used to tell folks all the time that not having a benchmark is a benchmark in itself. So, really, phase one needs to be that, hey, let's set the benchmarks. Let's understand, to your point, how many calls are we missing? And once we know it, we can understand what are our conversion rates on the calls that we do have. And then what is our average new pay appointment value? You can start to create a pretty quick back of the napkin story that tells you, oh, if I'm missing 20, 30% of my calls and we convert at this rate typically, and half of my calls that come in are new patient bookings, well, we could be missing out on tens of thousands of dollars of revenue. But once you set that initial benchmark, it gives you something to track and measure against and look at success. And I think when you talk about setting KPIs, that's one very small example. I'm sure there are dozens of others, but it's one that we run into quite a bit.
Yep. Yeah, it's huge. Like you said, ability to get them on the schedule, ability to get the phones answered. Um, there's a lot of dental offices in your market. You want to make sure you're available for the patient. And at the end of the day, great patient experience leads usually to great outcomes for the dental practice, great clinical outcomes for the patient because you're going to have great dentists in there. It's an overall great experience and they want to come back to you.
Well, speaking of getting patients in the door, let's talk about something that I know is near and dear to your heart because we have this conversation almost on the daily, the marketing funnel gap. What are you seeing? We talked about the phone, right? The phone is one piece of the equation, but oftentimes there's this marketing outlet that DSOs really don't know how to scale when it comes to, okay, maybe I was running a practice or two, but scaling up a funnel, right? And a marketing ecosystem to drive patients through the door, not for one location, 10, 20, 30, 100 locations. Let's talk about the tracking gap that you see as folks start to scale up marketing in a DSO.
Yeah. So listen, if all you track is production, you're only watching the scoreboard at the end of the day, not the plays that got you there. So what I mean by that is when you really look at the funnel stages from a marketing standpoint, most marketers will say, hey, great, I spent X amount of dollars and I generated X amount of leads, and here's my cost per lead. And they kind of say, hey, my job's done and the rest is on you, practice, make this really work. And the truth is, you got to track that funnel all the way down. So it should be lead to schedule, schedule to show rate, show to treatment are really the key metrics and ratios you want to measure at each stage. You can, if you're able to zone in on those, you're able to really figure out where your leakage is in your funnel. And fixing one hidden leak can be worth tens of thousands of dollars a month to you. So that's really the key when you look at that funnel is, do I understand these metrics? If I'm a GP office taking most major insurances, I can establish some rough thresholds there. Like, hey, lead to schedule or schedule to show rate all of a sudden should be in like an 80% bucket. If I'm fee for service, it's going to be a little bit lower because of the way the practice is. But those are the core metrics to figure out initially, how's my funnel working and do I have any leakage going on in there?
Yeah, I remember it's funny you say the leaky funnel. When I was working in marketing automation, oh gosh, a decade and a half, 2 decades ago, that was the big thing, right? Like, how do you fix the leaky funnel? And the whole play there was to use technology and tools to, capture those people and nurture them along the way. But I think the concept there is still valid 2 decades later, right? These patients, we want to, you mentioned it doesn't just stop at creating a lead and booking an appointment. We want to schedule rate, we want to show rate, and we want to have them in the door. There's an opportunity to create touch points through marketing throughout that entire engagement funnel, whether that's through standard emails, SMS messaging, phone calls, AI, maybe. There's a whole bunch of a suite of tools now that are available to help close the gap in that leaky funnel so that we're not just thinking about, top of the funnel lead production and, hopefully some revenue at the end. All that stuff in the middle matters.
Yeah. So if you go back to kind of like where we initially started this, and I said, hey, like let's pour the right foundation in. And you were mentioning a lot of the good stuff, which is should there be some AI tools in there? What are the technology we should place? That's exactly what we mean by put the foundation in right. Because this, again, why waste losing tens of thousands of dollars in 6 months or something? Get the foundation right. You know where to zone in. You can scale a lot easier. Bringing on practices makes it easier. And then really what you're paying attention to is either my marketing guy or gal down the hallway, they're doing the job the right way, or maybe it's a vendor and do I have the right vendor in place? And you'll know that because you're hitting the benchmarks or not.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's take a quick pause there from the marketing front and take another poll question here. What are the biggest barrier to hitting your growth targets right now? Lack of visibility into performance metrics, something that we just spent quite a bit of time talking about. Recruiting and retaining talent. So, maybe we'll touch on this as we go, but people process technology. People's a big portion of that equation. Ah, they left away. Oh, there it goes. System fragmentation and data silos. That's a big one that's near and dear to my heart. Rising operational costs and unsure how to leverage technology. So pop your answers in there. We will see what comes up and we'll go through those things out. So looks like the polls are a go. We'll get some of those responses as the show goes on. All right. System fragmentation problem. So I kind of alluded to a little bit as we're going through the poll here, but back to the consulting days again, it all came down to people, process, and technology, right? And oftentimes it doesn't matter if you've got the right people and you've got a good process, and now you're looking to maybe automate that process or create some systemization around it. If there's fragmentation, it causes a problem. And I've noticed in all markets, the dental market is no different, that there are these ebbs and flows and cycles of expansion and contraction of technology. What tends to happen is you get a technology solution, it fills this massive gap in a marketplace, and then there are little pieces and parts that it doesn't fill. So these spin-off solutions start coming, and then you get all these point solutions that spin out of it. And it's good because you solve all these little niche problems, but now you start to create these massive data silos, fragmentation, and ultimately rising costs. Ryan, have you seen that cycle? And then what do you think that DSOs are dealing with in that today?
Yeah, so absolutely have seen that cycle. I guess the way I say it is, look, if you have 6 logins to get to one number, you're essentially losing money before you can even see the spreadsheet or the Google Doc these days. So what I've seen over the years is it's what you just said, which is, hey, there's a great solution, they put it in, then they hear about another solution, they kind of bolt that one on too, but it does very similar, but maybe has a feature or two that maybe you don't have, and then they throw another one on. And so then it becomes very clunky for the DSOs. And again, going back to what we said, is pour the foundation the right way, plummet all the way down through that funnel, lead all the way to treatment accepted. And then you can start figuring out, okay, common sense, what I call common sense type things is with these systems, what is my record of truth that we are going to measure this on, whether we are successful or not? And as long as I can connect those pieces each way down, that is really the key. The trouble that they tend to get themselves into is somebody comes to Josh and Josh says, hey, new patients are up. We added 40 new patients this month. Then they go to another system that Ryan's looking at or whatever. And I say, well, no, Josh, you show 40, I show 32. What's going on here? And they spend all their time trying to figure out which is the right data, what's the record of truth. And then that problem really becomes, well, what lever do I pull to fix it so that we can grow new patients the way that we want if that's the problem? So that's why I said too many logins, it's always going to be a problem. Build the funnel the right way, get that foundation in. That helps the DSOs get to where they need to go a lot faster. Easier said than done, but that's why you want to vet the softwares and partner with the right people.
Yeah, so I think system of record is always an important one, right? And no matter what kind of business you're in, DSOs included, having that core system of record is important. What do you think the core tech stack is after that? And what are the key integration points that people should be thinking about?
So for most DSOs, when you look at it from a tech stack standpoint, it's all right, how are you generating your leads? Most are heavily weighted in this Google PPC bucket. And there's some
Hmm.
other tech in there too, like SEO, Google My Business should be a piece of it. If you do that right, you can get great lift on it. Some will do direct mail, etc. But the point is, top of funnel, leads are coming in. You got to be able to track that by source. And then you want to go into a system that can track it. And with the AI systems out there, and one you mentioned is Peerlogic, that does it really well because at that point, the AI tech identifies whether it was a new opportunity or existing opportunity and whether that got scheduled or not. As a marketer, that is huge. You can navigate board conversations really easy. You can really help your ops partner figure some things out. Because really, what you're saying is, I can really dial in my spend and how effective I was. Because I know my cost per lead, I know my cost per schedule. Mid funnel down could be a variety of different issues. But normally, it's going to flow directly into your PMS from there. And so while you may have an offshoot of like a go high level or a CRM over here to help contact those leads that maybe didn't schedule, the flow is usually directly into your PMS that you're using, where really that's usually where the record of truth lies. But then we got to start troubleshooting and solving for things of, man, we got great top of funnel growth, but I'm not seeing it show up on the schedules. It could be a capacity problem. It could be the way we're setting up our schedules. It could be we're booking our patients too far out because the office is only open 2 days a week. And, no shows will spike after 7 days if you can't get them onto the schedule, that type of stuff. So at a high level, that's kind of the way the tech stack works. And
Yeah.
then that's the beauty of it. Again, it allows you to start dialing in. And, for us, like we want the good marketers to not stop at where it's scheduled, go all the way down the funnel, help your ops partner. I call it MOPS, marketing and ops. You got to work together. This is a great way to do it because you're all trying to solve the same problem. Are we getting patients in, whether new or existing, and are our schedules accommodating to them? It's a great problem to have when you're like, I got too many leads. I don't know what to do with them.
Yeah. Yeah. So that fragmentation comes from doing things that don't really align to that single pane of glass concept, right? Like, okay, if our record of truth is the practice management system, anything that we're doing, whether it's tracking, marketing funnel, inbound calls, whatever it is, it needs to be integrated tightly into that practice management system so that we can have that single pane of glass of what the patient's interaction with our practice is, and we can have that end to end. Hey, we spent this money on much money on marketing, it delivered this much in actual showed appointments and revenue.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, once you have that set up, it's really easy to have the marketing to ops to finance conversation because you're all speaking the same language and you're aligned on the metrics, you're aligned on where we're looking at the report. And the business can really focus their time, like I said, getting the patients in and then figuring out, great, if I got some fragmentation here, how do I fix it? How do I fine tune it? How do I know what levers to go pull so that we can get the support in for the organization that we need to?
Well, that's a good segue here to a question that we have in the chat, and it also leads right into the next topic of our presentation here from Ryan. We have, speaking of core metrics, how do you get leadership buy-in for standardizing KPIs when different departments are protective of their own metrics? So it's a great question. It's all people, process, technology. We just did a deep dive on the tech side, but this is the people side, leadership buy-in. What are your thoughts here, Ryan?
So I always think metrics, I've learned this a long time ago, metrics can solve a lot of conversations and discrepancies amongst departments. And in our world, there's basically two kinds. There is what I call business impact metrics, which every business leader should align on pretty quickly. Some of the things we've talked about, I guess in dental, what they'll say is butts and seats, but it's really, did the patients show? Are we seeing them? Treatment presented, treatment accepted, anything that really impacts the business and gives you the health of the business all the way down. So again, KPIs are going to be cost per leader, cost per lead, cost per booked. What's our show rate? What's our cancel rate of the treatment that was presented? What treatment was accepted? That suite of metrics right there, it's really easy. Dummy a slide together, slide it in front of the team and ask them, does anybody disagree with these are some core metrics we should be using to measure our business? This is ones I want to see reported out daily, if ideally in weekly reports, things like that. The way I've always done it is what I just told you. Define them, get alignment on the definition, slide that in front of the table. And then the question on the table is, does anybody disagree that we should not be measuring these? That usually step one. Step two is each department, rightfully so, is going to have some KPIs specific to their world. And that's really for them to kind of put on the table and say, hey, here's the ones that I think are really key. It helps me manage my line of business. As the marketing guy, I might not so much care about some of those metrics, but I get it. They got to manage their line of business with it. In marketing, what I always call it's the vanity metrics, impressions, clicks, things like that. I haven't sat in a boardroom in 10 years where somebody's asked me, have we increased our impressions or clicks? As a marketer in the trench, it's probably a good KPI for you to know so you can make sure you're moving things in the right direction. But those aren't business metrics that the board or the business at the end of the day really cares about. So let's align on the ones that are really important, get the team wrapped around that, define what the reports are, define what the metrics are, slide that slide in front of them. And like I said, again, the question is, does anybody disagree that this is what we should be looking at? Opens up a nice doorway for them to bolt on some other metrics where we say, oh, great, I didn't add those ones in there. These ones really make sense. Let's throw that on here, then go build the dashboard appropriately.
Yeah, phenomenal. Yeah, I think Jessica had a pretty nice response here that wrapped that up in a tidy little bow. Setting standards creates proof of the score. Team plays to win. Nobody likes to lose, and reminding everybody that we're all in the same boat. So rowing in the same direction. And I think when we think about what we're talking about here, and this is concept that I've discussed with quite a few CEOs in the DSO space, is this idea of building an integrated portfolio, and that integrated portfolio is driving enterprise value. It sounds like there's been a pretty big market shift over the last 5, 6 years, where there was a time where you could just buy up practices, slap them together, and then flip them to maybe a private equity group or someone else, or maybe a larger DSO who is looking to buy that up. But those times have changed, and now making that financial turn to your next partner actually requires you to build value in the portfolio inherently before you can flip it. So that idea of an integrated portfolio across people, process, and technology is really the culmination of all the things that we've been talking about, right? Have a tech stack. We have to align on the metrics and the KPIs that we're going to measure within that tech stack. We have to have the people all agreed on what those KPIs and metrics are and rowing in the same direction and delivering a consistent patient experience. If you do that, we should, in theory, create a DSO that's driving a higher EBITDA margin. Thoughts there?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think it's key for them. DSOs, look, you could be 5 locations, you could be 200. Everything you said applies to them. So I don't have any disagreements or anything with what you said there. Like you said, KPI is moving in the right direction. The marketplace has shifted a little bit, part of it due to the
Yep.
economy and stuff. But whether we were doing this or we were running a McDonald's, an efficiently ran business is always going to be very attractive in the marketplace, whether that comes to getting people to join your organization, whether that becomes to acquiring practices to join your organization or selling. So the more efficient you can be at it, the more attractive it is to everybody.
Yeah, and we haven't talked a ton about process. I think we have, we've danced around it a little bit, but one of the things that I notice, especially when it comes to buying technology, people think that technology will solve the problem inherently. Well, at the end of the day, if you automate something, but you just automate a crappy process, that's all you've done, right? So going back to your idea of a foundation, right? One of the layers of that foundation is a good process. And I think this becomes a huge challenge for operators as they acquire practices to roll into their DSO. And we know the story, right? You buy a practice. The practice has the front office administrator who's been there for 25, 30 years. They do it their way, and they're stubborn about doing it their way. But guess what? You've been acquired by this group, and this group is building a foundation for something that is built to scale, not the way of that one practice. And it's those little chinks, and multiply that by, you said, 10, 20, 30. Now you're going to come up with a big foundational process gap that no amount of technology is going to solve. And I think really just defining that process and ingraining it into the people part of it is super important.
Yeah, look, totally agree. 100 years ago, if I was a farmer, I used to have a mule and I used to throw, like a steel instrument on the back and I'd plow my field that way. And then I had a process for that. Eventually, a tractor came out and it drastically changed the farming industry.
Right.
When I was in high school, the internet just came out. Nobody really knew what it was. It changed the way shopping's done. So, to your point, look, processes are going to change. Technology is there to help you, absolutely. Our job is to adapt to it, refine our process, and make sure it's as efficient as possible. And I don't think it's a surprise to anybody on this phone call, or if you were at some dental conferences recently, the hot topic's going to be AI. Everyone's trying to figure out just what it is right now. And so what I tell all the DSOs, I think there's some really good vendors that have figured some things out and they're building some other things. There's probably 20 other vendors that are going to tell you they can make your life magically better tomorrow. It's not going to happen if you don't get the process right, and it doesn't happen if you don't get the right vendor in place.
Yeah. Yeah. AI is not going to magically fix a bad process. I think that's a great statement there. And then what does Tanner say? Change or get out of the way, unfortunately. Yeah. I've heard that, right? Like just because you've been here 25 years and this is the way you've always done it. I hate to say this in all the businesses that I'm involved with, anytime someone says, well, this is how we did it here, or this is the way we do that, just because that's the way we've always done it is always a challenge, right? Like it's never an answer you want to hear. That's not a way to progress, and it's not a way to creating something awesome that scales. All right. Jessica has something else here before we jump into our next poll question. Before dashboards and scorecards, our EBITDA sunk to 12%. After implementation and reducing fragmentation, it is back up over 23%. Very healthy. Processing KPIs are crucial and pain drives actions. Okay, so I'm guessing the pain described here, Jessica, is the fact that we didn't have dashboards and scorecards in place, right? So that everyone was just doing it their own way. There was no standardization, and you were able to set that scorecard and track it and measure it in some sort of system of record, I assume. So cool, good proof point for all the things that we're talking about. All right, let's go to our, I think, final poll question, and hopefully the magicians in the back end can tell me how to get the results of these poll questions as we go along here. Which best describes your current level of integration across locations and functions? Oh, okay, this is kind of a maturity model type question. Fully integrated, one dashboard for all things, partially integrated, some data sources of truth, minimal integration, most reporting is not accurate, and no integration. Each location operates on its own. All right. Well, looks like we've got some scores trickling in. Either that's one person who's answered the poll or everybody is partially integrated. So partially integrated is better than the other two options. We would love to get to fully integrated, because if we go back to what we talked about on the last slide, you're going to drive the most value in your business if you have a fully integrated portfolio across people, process, and technology. Okay, a question here from Elliot before we go on. If we were already mid-year, how do you adapt the 90-day approach without disrupting existing quarterly targets and initiatives? Ryan, I'm going to let you answer that because I don't know the answer to that.
Fair enough. So there's always, keep the ship moving on what's your bread and butter and what you got to do. And so again, I'm just going to use marketing as the example. Hey, I got to run pay-per-click every day. I got to do my SEO. I got to do my Google My Business, optimize it, make sure it's moving in the right direction. Over the next 90 days, 120 days, whatever it may be, I probably have a set of different initiatives I'm trying to launch during that time frame. So it's keep the ones going, launch the other ones. So I always favor small pilots initially, so you can get the learnings out of it, and then you have a really good story. It's either one of two things: either the pilot worked or it didn't work. And if it did work, we should advance this and move it going forward because it really makes sense for our business. And so that's how I've always done it over the years. And if that means I got to bring a vendor in for it, or maybe we got to shift some work around, or maybe even hire somebody up, once I can usually kind of show like it's going to be a positive impact on the business, those conversations are a little bit easier to do. And then even if I got to do the pilot myself with like across 5 offices or something, I'll tough it out, do the pilot. And then once that ROI looks really good and we can track and the KPIs look really good, it's generally a pretty easy conversation.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing is, we can't hold too tight to the truths we think we believe in, right? And the way that functionally looks maybe in practice is we always carve out maybe 10% of our time, energy, budget for innovation, because the market is moving very, very quickly. And if we're not continuing to test and iterate and innovate on certain things, how are we going to know that even what we're doing in our 90-day plan could be even better than it already is? Is that maybe a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, we have 90-day plans. It doesn't say it's a 90-day plan written in stone.
Right.
So, the business happens, right? Like things shift, stuff like that. And this is where good communications with your partners and stuff are across the board. But you say, great, here's the things we're doing. We got to make sure it's moving in the right direction. I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot, but hey, I went to this conference. I saw this cool technology. I don't know, it's going to cost me $1,000 to test it for 3 months. Got a little bandwidth. I want to stand that up. You have to adapt. You have to change. You don't do it, your competition's going to do it. So it's like, hey, yeah, we got to be flexible in this thing and make sure we're kind of moving things in the right direction. I think one of the worst spots that a DSO can be in, or on the marketing side, operation side, if you will, it's what we've been talking about, is you don't want to get to the end of the year and be like, we've done everything we've done. We've either decreased our growth or marginally growed it. I didn't test anything new. I'm going into 2026 and I don't have anything to really present to the bosses saying, here's how we're going to get that lift and make the business healthier. Which, by the way, I think when we fail to do that, I'm not just talking about getting patients through the door. I think we fail our employees and our team members. They want to work for a growing, thriving company too and be a part of something. And that's part of our gig, which is let's make sure we're leading this thing and moving it forward.
Awesome. Love that. Love that. Can't be too set in stone. Well, we appreciate everybody taking a little bit of time to speak with us. If you want a little bit more help moving your 90-day plan forward, we've created a 90-day roadmap. This was put together by the magicians in the background and Ryan. I had nothing to do with it. Trust me, you don't want me to have anything to do with it. I wouldn't be that helpful to you. But there's some great stuff in here, right? So mapping out full patient acquisition and retention funnels. Ryan spent a ton of time on that. The marketing gap is one of those things that every DSO struggles with. Auditing current data sources and integrations, defining enterprise level KPIs, something that come up not only between me and Ryan's discussion, but through the chat as well. And then creating a single reporting cadence and an owner for that thing. So that 90-day roadmap can be found here. As promised, you can get this workbook. There's a QR code on your screen. Please take a second here, take a picture of it, scan it, download it, reach out to us and let us know what you think. Obviously, the workbook is only as good as the action you put behind it. So if you need a little bit extra juice behind it, you can reach out to Ryan or myself. You can see Ryan's contact here. He's got Ryan Torreson at gmail.com, and you can find him on LinkedIn. I know he's always posting phenomenal content there on LinkedIn. Tons of real life practical advice from DSOs there. And then you can find me as well. Yeah, my email, josh@peerlogic.com, or on LinkedIn. I've got a lot of different content, anything from dental specific to stuff that's happening in the B2B SaaS world. Thank you, everybody, for joining today's webinar. Please reach out to us if you need anything else. Download the workbook. We'd love to get your feedback on it. Until next time, on behalf of Ryan and myself, thanks for being here.